Number 1.
As a medical student, currently in my clinical years, I often struggle to keep in touch with a lot of my non-med friends, let alone meet new people. After complaining to a friend that I was tired of being single and coming home to an empty bed every night, she asked me if I considered trying online dating. I was skeptical, but she told me several success stories her friends had had through one particular site. I decided to give it a go. After all, I really had nothing to lose. I figured as long as I was careful and didn't have ridiculous expectations, I'd be fine. So I created a profile, uploaded some nice pictures of myself, and tried to be as specific as possible about what I was after and a potential partner. Within 12 hours of making a profile, I was bombarded with messages. One in particular stood out. His name was Adam. He was a doctor who, after practicing for a few years, had gotten a PhD in arts in order to research health safety. He now worked at my university in research and lectured in ethics. He was good looking, kind, and funny. Even though he was about 20 years my senior, I was immediately hooked. We talked for about a week before he offered to take me out for a drink. Over the next couple of weeks, we met up twice for drinks and texted almost non-stop in between. I was completely smitten. He seemed to be perfect, even having the same quirky sense of humor as me. When I told him I'd spent part of my childhood being raised in Thailand, he gleefully told me that it was his favorite place to holiday, and he'd gone multiple times. But there was something off about him, as well. Even though he talked about how he would be lecturing me in ethics next year, he wouldn't tell me his last name. When we were joking about terrible nicknames my classmates gave our lecturers, I made an offhand comment that I'd dig up dirt about him, to which he replied, "Oh man, there's a lot of dirt to be dug, but it was a long time ago." And then he promptly changed the subject. He was even interviewing one of my friends, another redhead with the same name as me, for a research project he would be conducting next year. A few days later, Grace, one of the doctors I was friendly with on my ward, asked me how everything was going with him. I told her how elated I was, but also about his strange refusal to give me his last name. "Easy," she said. "The school has a database of all the lecturers with pictures. Even with just a first name, you should be able to work out what his last name is. I'm sure he's being cagey because of the whole lecturer-student thing. Here, use my iPad." Sure enough, I only had to type in the name Adam, and his photo was the first one to pop up. "Here, Adam Becker. That's him," I said. "We've got another 10 minutes before the MDM. Go on. Stick his name into Google and see what pops up." I really wish I hadn't. The first thing that appeared on Google was an article from our national newspaper with the title, "Sex Case Doctor, Jailed for Pedophilia." I assumed it was just another name. Adam Becker can't be that uncommon a name, right? Reading through the articles, my heart sank. Everything matched up with Adam. His age, his hometown, his university, him moving to another town. It all matched. I felt sick and handed the article to Grace. We looked for more information and found other articles. He'd been jailed 10 years ago for raping 6 underage girls. He'd been sentenced to 2 years, but had his sentence extended to 3.5 when the prosecution appealed. Instead of a conscious change in career choice, as he told me, he'd been removed as a doctor by the medical council. For the rest of the day, I walked around feeling sick. When I realized his love of Thailand was most likely due to child sex tourism, I promptly lost my lunch. I blocked his number on my phone, removed my dating profile, and blocked him on any other social media I can think of. I had to call my friend who was applying for the project and warn her about it. This is where the story should have ended. But as you're well aware, this is Let's Not Meet. So of course, the story gets deeper. I posted the article to a Facebook group of girls I'm a member of, telling them how shocked I was. I should point out that it's a small group, only about 50 girls. Well, within an hour, 5 girls in the group had commented, saying that they'd either dated this guy or knew someone who had. We were all redheads, and at 24, I was shocked to find that I was the oldest of the lot. One girl talked about how she dated him for 2 months. He'd held a knife to her chest during sex, and when she'd found out about the pedophilia charges, he tried to threaten her and bribe her to stay with him. And the most horrifying part was this girl was an 18-year-old, who we always joked on the page looked about 12. One of the girls, a close friend of mine, Dominique, told me to get around to her house ASAP. Once I got there, she sat me down and showed me an online profile he had on an adult website. The profile discussed in detail his fetishes for knives, daddy-daughter roleplay, and in particular, how he had a huge teacher-student fetish. Adam would have picked you out as soon as he saw you were one of his students, she said. It's what he does. He's managed to convince people he's rehabilitated, but he's back to his old ways, trying to get girls online. He's dangerous, and he's violent. You need to be careful. When she showed me several pictures he had uploaded to this profile of him putting knives in women's vaginas, I started crying. It all seemed far too surreal to be true, and I suddenly became terrified of what he'd do when he realized I'd figured out his secret. The job at the university was his second chance, and I knew how much he loved it. If he thought I could be a threat to his career, there was no telling what he'd do to stop me. I went to the uni the next day, along with the president of our Students' Association, who was horrified that this man had been hired in the first place. Within an hour, we were meeting with the head of the school, where we handed over statements from myself and 2 other girls, who were also students at the uni when he had been contacting them. Dominique had gone to the trouble of taking multiple screenshots of the profile where he described his teacher-student fetish in detail, and handed those in as well. We found out that the school had hired him, as they had been reassured that he was rehabilitated. Upon seeing the statements and evidence, all the dean could say was, apparently, we were wrong. Adam no longer works at the university. Why he was allowed to lecture ethics, of all things, I will never know.
Number 2.
When I was a little kid, maybe 3 or 4, and my older brother was 6 or 7, we had a pediatrician named Dr. Mike. We never noticed any unusual behavior from him. He was always more than happy to have parents in the room, and never made me or my older brother feel uncomfortable. In fact, we loved him. He had lots of animals in the office, parrots and fish, and tons of toys in the waiting room. My parents never caught on to anything suspicious until they saw his face in the paper one day. He ended up being a child molester and was using his practice to photograph children and use the pictures for further enjoyment. My parents never told us why we switched doctors until we were old enough to understand. I remember when my mom told me, I said, "So, Dr. Mike could have molested me?" And she goes, "Oh, no, sweetie. He liked little boys. You were fine." Thanks, Mom. Comforting.
Number 3.
This all took place between a year and almost 3 years ago. Few people in my life know about this, but I figured it'd make a good account for all of you to read. It was early December of 2011, and I was getting ready for a date with someone I met on an online dating site. Before I met this person, I'd had mostly positive experiences with people I've met online. Even having a moderately successful, while-it-lasted relationship with a girlfriend I'd met on the same dating site, and being in a very serious, but long distance, with frequent visits, relationship with someone I met in a game we both played. I figured tonight would be pretty normal. I was jittery, but I have very bad social anxiety, and I'm always nervous about meeting someone for the first time. This guy seemed out of my league though. He was about 27 or 28, to my almost 22. He was finishing med school, had moved here to the Midwest from India, and could speak 5 languages. I was living with family again after the failed long-distance relationship forced me back to the U.S., was going to community college, and was working a seasonal job at a holiday event. In retrospect, I probably should have known something was up. We met for dinner, had entrees and sake, and even after several glasses, I couldn't shake a nervous feeling. He asked if I wanted to go to a Mexican place, not too far away, for margaritas too, and I stupidly agreed. I got in the car with him. I feel so fucking lucky that I'm not dead, after seeing how this all panned out. We got there without a hitch, but once we sat down, I noticed the place was totally dead. I think it was 1 a.m. by this point. He started making me super uncomfortable, asking very lewd questions about my past relationships, and getting very sexual, and generally putting me off with all of his discussion about hookup culture. I told him that wasn't what I was looking for at all, and that this was way too soon for me to be comfortable talking about this. He apologized and took me home. I think I was too drunk at this point to realize getting in the car again was a bad idea. Luckily, he dropped me off without incident. I said I had more fun than I actually did, booze talking, and that I'd text him tomorrow and see him again. I woke up feeling very skeeved out, remembering the night before and thinking how dumb I was. I waited till later in the afternoon, and then I texted him, saying that I had fun, but I didn't think that we were quite on the same wavelength, and that I didn't want to pursue anything with him. Polite enough, I thought. I did my best to keep blame away from him, and moved on. He started messaging my dating profile after that, and my phone, when I didn't answer him there. I told him again that I didn't think we were on the same page, and that I wasn't going to reply anymore. This made him go nuts. At least once a day for a month, I would get messages on this site, my phone, and phone calls, from different usernames and numbers, saying it was him, threatening to rape me, to find me. He at one point called me, and I thought the number was my doctor. I answered, and he shouted that if he ever saw me on the streets, he would make a monkey rape me. I contacted the police shortly after this started, but they said they couldn't do anything. Okay, great. I blocked every username and number I had heard from him from then on, documenting everything. Eventually, shit dies down by late January 2012. Then, out of the blue last year, in about June of 2013, I get a call from an unknown number. I'd been having a great day. I'd just been on my way home from a hiking trip with my boyfriend, whom I met just after all this shit died down. I did tell him about all this at some point before this day. For a minute, I didn't know who it was, and then he starts talking about that date, and how he's back in the Midwest, from New York City again. It was him. I start panicking, feeling like I'm going to cry, and I say, "Don't ever call this number again. I'll call the police." I hang up. A few days later, my manager at work says that there was a guy looking for me that seemed really shifty. She described him, and it was him. Name was his even. She wouldn't let him leave his number though. I was so fucking scared, but I haven't heard from him since either. To this day though, I don't sleep with my windows open, even in this heat, unless the boyfriend is here with me. I live on the first floor. He knows where I live. I still get real jumpy at night when the back garden isn't lit. It really fucks with my head, even now. Edit. Since a lot of people are asking, no, I haven't run into him in person again. This is also why my police apparently refused to file a report. They said to me that if I don't have physical proof of harm, or him making a threat in person, they can't prove the messages and calls were from him. Edit 2. I appreciate all the help that this sub has given me and advice on how to track this guy down. Unfortunately, all I have to go on is his first name and age. Truth be told, I'm also quite worried of tracking him down. I don't know if he'd come after me again or not. It's been over a year, but it had been over a year when I got the call, and he showed up at my work in June of 2013.